Napoleon Bonaparte. That name alone conjures up these huge images of genius and, well, of tyranny. We're talking about a military mastermind who literally redrew the map of Europe, but also a guy whose ambition led to the deaths of millions. He's got to be one of history's most fascinating and, for sure, one of its most controversial figures.
So, what was he? Was he a hero, spreading all these incredible new ideas from the revolution? Or was he a villain who just plunged an entire continent into war for his own personal glory? That is the big question, and that's exactly what we're going to get into.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. It's March 1796. The French army in Italy is just a complete mess. They're exhausted, they're demoralized, they're losing. And then their new general arrives. The soldiers look up and see this guy who's barely 5'2", and they laugh. I mean, can you blame them? But then he speaks, and suddenly the laughter just stops. They realize almost instantly that they are in the presence of someone extraordinary.
So, how did he do it? How did he command that kind of respect? Well, to really get the man, you have to understand where he came from. See, Napoleon wasn't just short. He was always the outsider, and that lit a fire in him, a burning ambition to prove every single person wrong.
He was born on the island of Corsica right after it became French, so he was an outsider from day one. An Italian by blood, but a Frenchman by chance. And when he got to military school, you can just imagine. The aristocratic classmates made fun of his accent, his height. So he hid out in the library, not with friends, but with books, studying the greatest commanders in history. By the time he graduated, the world was about to explode. The French Revolution was kicking off.
The revolution threw France into total chaos. The monarchy was gone, different factions were at war, and all the neighboring empires started invading, terrified that this whole revolution thing might spread. For most people, this was a nightmare. But for a young, ambitious officer with no noble family to back him up, this chaos, well, it was a ladder.
And boy, did he climb that ladder, and fast. At Toulon, his brilliant use of artillery gets him promoted to general at just 24 years old. In Paris, he saves the government from a mob, and boom, he's a national hero. He takes that broken army in Italy and turns it into an unstoppable force. He even managed to spin a total military disaster in Egypt into a massive PR victory, coming home to a hero's welcome. By 1799, France was desperate for a strong leader, so Napoleon seized his moment, overthrew the government, and just like that became the most powerful man in the country.
So okay, now he has all the power. But what's he going to do with it? This is where Napoleon becomes this walking, talking contradiction. I mean, think about it. He was a product of a revolution that overthrew a king, only to turn around and crown himself emperor.
Let's just break this down, because it's wild. On the reformer side, his achievements were absolutely monumental. The Napoleonic Code? It created legal equality for all men, and it's still influential all over the world today. He stabilized the whole economy, modernized the nation, and yet the tyrant side is just as powerful. He made himself emperor, he brought back slavery, he rolled back women's rights, crushed the free press, and then put his own family members on the thrones of Europe. It's a lot.
So you have to wonder, how did a ruler who was so autocratic keep his heroic image? Well, it's because Napoleon's greatest battlefield wasn't always covered in mud and cannon fire. The guy was an absolute genius at crafting his own myth. He was a master of propaganda. This right here, this comparison says everything. We all know that famous painting on the left, Napoleon, this heroic, godlike figure on a magnificent horse conquering the Alps. He actually commissioned it himself. The reality, over on the right, was a little less glamorous. He crossed on a sturdy mule. This is pure Napoleon. He wasn't just winning battles, he was winning the story. So what was really driving him? Reform? The glory of France? In his own words, it was a lot simpler and way more revealing. Power is my mistress. I mean, that quote just cuts right to the heart of it all. His ambition wasn't just for a nation, it was a deeply personal, all-consuming obsession. But that same insatiable hunger for power, the very engine of his rise, was also going to be his ruin. He became so convinced of his own invincibility that he started to make some absolutely catastrophic mistakes.
You can see his empire start to crack under its own weight, and it really starts with 3 fatal mistakes. His economic war against Britain, it backfired, and it crippled all of Europe. Then he gets bogged down in this brutal, endless war in Spain. But his biggest blunder, the one he'd never recover from, was the invasion of Russia in 1812.
Just look at this number, roughly 590,000. That is staggering.
That's about how many soldiers in Napoleon's Grand Armée never returned from Russia. He marched in with over 600,000 men. Almost all of them were lost to the winter, to starvation, to battle. It was a self-inflicted wound his empire would never, ever recover from. After Russia, the end came swiftly. A whole coalition of enemies ganged up and defeated him at Leipzig, and they forced him into exile on the island of Elba. But the story still wasn't over. In this unbelievable comeback, he escapes, returns to France, and raises another army. This final gamble, what we call the 100 Days, it all ended in that legendary defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. And this time, there was no coming back. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, and that's where he died in 1821.
So after all the battles, all the conquests, all the contradictions, what is Napoleon's enduring legacy? How are we supposed to weigh his impact on the world today?
You know, his positive impact is undeniable. Sure, his armies were tools of conquest, but they also spread these revolutionary ideas of legal equality and shattered old feudal systems. But then you look at the negative side, and it's just devastating. The Napoleonic Wars cost millions of lives. He set up a police state, he crushed liberty, and he set back the rights of women and of enslaved people. In the end, he basically built a modern world on a foundation of war.
Which of course brings us right back to our original question. Hero or villain? He was a liberator who made himself an emperor, a modernizer who fueled endless war. His legacy is still a battlefield today. You know, maybe the real answer is that he was something much more complex and honestly more dangerous. He was like a force of nature that remade a continent in his own image. And maybe the question isn't just about him, but about us. How do we judge the people who create the future through destruction?